Okay. So I want to welcome Jason Morwick, who is our presenter today. This is the Better Collaboration Monthly Meetup online group. And as some of you already know, we talk about better ways for organizations and teams to work in a dispersed environment. That's a classical topic for Jason Morwick, who is really a telework expert, has written a book about making telework work, and he's coming up with a new book called Future Proofing Your Organization for the 21st Century. He's also wrote or published in journal magazines, websites such as Quality Progress, Review of Business Journal, Strategic HR Review, American Business Review, I6 Sigma magazine, and i6sigma.com. He's also on the advisory of board for nonprofit organization, the Telework Coalition. So I spoke with Jason before, and I know he has some very exciting information in his slides for us. And we also agree that if the team will be a relatively small one, we'll keep this meeting interactive so that everybody could share their own opinions and ask questions. So with that, I would want to let Jason start his presentation.
All right. Well, thank you, Mor, and thanks to all of you for joining us today and talk about how we can collaborate in the virtual workplace. As Mor said, and thank you, Mor, for the nice introduction. Quick plug, I am the co-author of Making Telework Work in the forthcoming book called Workshift. I put my contact information out here, so please feel free to reach out to me via email or Twitter, or come check out the blog at thevirtualleader.wordpress.com. If you want to talk about what it's like to be a teleworker, remote worker, how you can be more productive, collaborate better, etc. I'm going to talk a lot about that today. Before I jump into material, as I told Mor, because this is such a small group, I thought I'd do something a little bit different. We'll make this a little bit interactive. So I'm going to ask each one of you to introduce yourself, since there's not that many of us on the call today. So just tell me who you are and where you're calling in from, and tell me one personal fact about you. It could be something that you like to do, a hobby or interest. It could be something that you're proud of, but just tell me one personal thing. And I'll explain a little bit later in the presentation why I'm asking you to do this. So I'll pick on Mor to start with.
Okay, so I'm calling from Chestnut Ridge, New York. I'm the founder and the partner in Better Collaboration, which is a consulting group helping companies with strategy, implementation, and adoption related to visual collaboration. And on a personal note, my hobby is kite surfing, and I've got a new puppy here that we just got here last week.
Very nice. You're a brave man to do a meeting with a puppy in your home office. I usually have to kick my dogs outside. So
so far she's behaving really nice, so no problem there.
Very nice. Great, great. And Paul, I'll pick on you next.
Oh, sure. Well, my name is Paul Beliveau. You probably know these acronyms, SBHR and HRIP.
Yep.
These are credentials in the human resources, human capital management arena, of which I happen to be in the leadership of SHRM, former leadership in IRM, and now helping, well, first of all, helping myself get smart on better collaboration through the tutelage of Mor here, which is a new pet project for me, is to is identify ways to engage employees from whatever kind of work environment they happen to be in across the world. And I'll have some questions, obviously, in that regard as well. I've been an HR practitioner, including being a solutions enabler for, well, more years than I care to remember, but I joined the profession when it was not called human resources. It was called something else. So it probably gives you an idea how long that's been. More recently, I've went back and pulled my organization out of mothballs after being on hiatus for 5 years. It's called Avancé, Human Capital Management Advisors. And what we do is we provide trusted advisorships to organizations, preferably the C-level, to make sure that the humans within the organization are perceived with the greatest amount of value that they have to offer. In fact, my tagline is to increase the value of humans within the organization utilizing enabling technologies. A thing that you don't know about me, Moore doesn't know this either. I, for 10 years, was a vice president of a ski club up in New Hampshire.
Very nice.
Ski club is one word for it. You know Animal House? Well, that was our house. And we did that for over 10 years.
Excellent. Thank you, Paul. Very good. David, can you say hi and tell us a fact about yourself?
Sure. Nice to meet everybody. I am a recent graduate student, and I work in the area of data science and bioinformatics. And
I'm sorry, David, do you have both telephone and the iPad or computer open? Is that possible?
No.
Yeah. It seems like, okay, there is some echo coming from you, but please go ahead.
So yeah, I'm working in. I'm a researcher, and so I'm working collaborating with other people at other institutions and other locations, doing online collaboration. So that's what was of interest to me. Outside. Sorry about that reverb. I might have to turn my my microphone off if that happens. But yeah, so outside of work, I like to do hiking and biking.
Great.
Hey, just a note here about audio. It is highly recommended for everybody to either use a headset or another device with echo cancellation. So, for example, I'm using this device, which has echo cancellation in it. Jason is actually using the phone, which has echo cancellation in it. So please, if you do not have a headset, please mute yourself at this point, and in the future, remember to put a headset when you join a video conference. Any video conference, it works. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Moore. Sherry, could you say hi and tell us something about yourself?
Yes, hello everyone. I'm calling in from Bozeman, Montana, and I'm a senior instructional designer, and I actually just left my corporate job. I was fortunate for 3.5 years to telework from here in Bozeman, and then as a result of an airline merger, moved to Atlanta. And I have since, as I said, left that job and come back here to Montana. But I expect to be working in a software technology company shortly that is truly global. So this is very timely for me. And in terms of personal, I have a border collie named Dooley Wags. And I'm feeling very mellow because we just got out of the hot pools at the Bozeman Hot Springs.
Awesome.
Very nice.
Very good. Very good. And I believe the next person is Rick.
Hi, everybody. This is Rick Rubenstone. I met Moore at a conference back in May, New York Tech Day, where, surprisingly enough, my wife and I displayed the prototype of my son Stephen's new online collaboration platform, which is named Collaborism. The two of us, tried to display this without even having the app up and running at that time, which wasn't particularly easy, but we did it, and my wife actually surprised me. She did a great job meeting people and explaining what the platform is all about. The platform is a matchmaking, an online matchmaking collaboration platform that targets individuals as opposed to the enterprise, and we just launched it in private beta this past week. It's really meant for entrepreneurs broadly, and more specifically for anyone that would benefit from collaboration, whether that be somebody engaged in a complex field like an engineer or a scientist, or an artist, or somebody in a creative discipline. So we're off and running, receiving feedback and debugging the platform with the hope of launching publicly in maybe about 8 to 10 weeks. My background is in finance. I've been in the investment or brokerage industry most of my career. In a bit of serendipity, one way you could put it, my company laid off 10,000 people at the end of last year. I was one of them, and at that time, I was able to dedicate myself full time to helping my son launch his platform. The timing couldn't have been better in that regard. Although I'm hopefully about to re-engage in my my traditional field sometime after Labor Day. As far as personal stuff goes, I'm a bad golfer. I enjoy playing golf with my son and doing other things, being very active. And I enjoy my kids immensely. I've got a 19-year-old daughter and a 23-year-old son, and that does it.
Great. Thank you very much, Rick, and congratulations on launching Collaborative.
Thank you.
And Lynn, I'll pick on you next. And Lynn, I recognize you from Twitter, so glad to see that you joined us today. So please say hi and tell us something about yourself.
Okay. Hi, I'm Lynn, everyone, and I started independently researching the benefits of telework a little over a year ago, and it all started off, I talked to Paul about this, about family pressure to go back to work, in an office, and I started to think about alternatives to, the type of monotony we experience, most office workers experience still today. And then I ran into, various, remote workers who are telling their stories here and there, on the internet. And then since then, I joined Better Collaboration about 3 or 4 months ago. And so I've been working on their behalf since then. And I'm still just doing my research and trying to promote this way of working and, make other people aware of it. It's very easy, actually, for people to think, that there aren't any other possibilities. I mean, most of the more conventional people in my own circles probably think I'm a little bit crazy. But, with any new thing, it's hard to get people to accept it right off. And, yeah, I guess that's my introduction.
Very good. And tell, what do you like to do besides working in these meetup groups and everything else?
Actually, I do a lot of gaming. I'm still very young at heart for someone who's pushing 40. So I interact with a lot of Generation Y workers, and I can kind of see the World of Warcraft being the way that they work in the future, when they have to collaborate with people all around the world. And it's amazing to see the kids successfully interact and work collaboratively in a game environment without seeing each other face to face.
Yeah. You're stealing my thunder, so I'm going to cut you off, Lynn, because we're actually going to bring that up because there's been some studies that have been done around how people collaborate on online games such as World of Warcraft, Call of Duty, and that sort of stuff. So you bring up an excellent point, which hopefully I'll get to a little bit later on. But I don't want to leave out our last participant, I believe, which is Joseph. Hi there. I know you just joined a moment ago. If you could tell us where you're calling in from and tell us something personal about you, what you like to do, or anything that you want to share?
Well, how personal do you want to get?
Nothing that could get you in trouble, put it that way.
I see. Well, look, I've got to find my video first. As you can see, I'm in my home office, and so right now I'm running a company that is really dedicated to creating video collaboration platforms for the mobile workforce. And so that's what I do when I'm not in sessions like this. I'm tuning in from Oakland, California, and I'm an avid road biker. That's how I keep in shape pretty much these days.
Awesome. Very good. Very cool. Is there anyone else that's just on the phone that I missed that's not on video, or is that everyone?
I think that's all.
Okay. I'll just get into a little bit.
An operational question. Yeah, this is Joe.
Yes.
Is there a way to show everyone's video pane at one time? I'm having a hard time going through the video panes and finding out who's speaking.
Yeah, I can only see 4 at a time. Do you know if there's a way to see all 8 of us?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. All right. We'll bear with it.
All right. So what I'm going to cover today, and we'll try to make this an interactive session because there's not that many of us on the call. So if you do have a question anytime I go through the presentation, you don't have to wait till the end. If you just want to raise a point, we can have that discussion as we get into the various topics. So just make sure you wave at me through video or just scream at me over the phone. Either way will work. I have a tendency to talk fast because I grew up in the Northeast. So even though I've been living here in sunny Orlando, Florida for the past 13 years, I haven't learned how to slow down my speech yet. So if I go too fast, please slow me down. But the plan is for the next 40 minutes is really to talk about a couple of things. Number one, I'm going to talk about the perceptions of virtual collaboration. How do people perceive, especially people that are in traditional office-bound assignments, how do they perceive the collaboration with teleworkers or remote workers or people that they can't see face-to-face or not co-located with? And then I'll actually get into some research. So what does the research tell us? There have been some studies done, and what does that evidence and data show us? And then from there, we'll talk about some practical advice, just from my personal experience. Hopefully you will share your personal experiences as well, of how we can improve our collaboration in this evolving work environment. So I'm going to bring up something, and you've all have seen this, and this is old news, right? This is about 6-7 months old, I believe. Back in, I want to say the March time frame, Yahoo or somebody at Yahoo leaked an internal memorandum where they were reining in their teleworkers. And the memorandum is actually much longer than this. If you haven't actually seen it, it talks about productivity and some other things. But I took this snippet from that memorandum because it specifically talks about the topics that we're going to talk about today, about communication and collaboration. And my intent here is not to bash Yahoo. I'm not saying whether their policy now is right or wrong. When this news broke, there was a flurry of commentary and editorials about this move, and a lot of people saying that they disagreed with it. There were some supporters that said, because of the market position that they are currently in, that this was actually the right move to do. I'm not saying right or wrong, but what I wanted to show is that what they did is they put in writing, in black and white, some of the most commonly held perceptions about how people collaborate when they're not face-to-face. So obviously the executives at Yahoo, as well as other executives in other companies, believe that in order to communicate and collaborate best, we need to be co-located. We need to be working, as they say, side by side, present in our office every day. And a lot of people bring up about, well, what about these impromptu meetings, these hallway conversations, these discussions around the water cooler or in the break room, and how that leads to innovation and collaboration. Well, it's not just Yahoo that feels this way. After this news broke out, I was talking with an executive for a very large Fortune 50 company that's a Silicon Valley-based company, and the executive there said words almost to the same effect. She said, you know, when people work from their home office, when they're, working remotely, productivity actually increases. And in fact, she was right. There's several studies that have been done that show that productivity increases when we let people work from home or work remotely versus tethering them to an office cubicle in some predetermined location. But then she said, but, and this was a big but when people work remotely, they miss out on some of the collaboration, and collaboration in general goes down. And she's not alone in her view. The late Steve Jobs, and everybody can appreciate the genius of Steve Jobs. Well, Steve Jobs was no fan of working remotely. According to Walter Isaacson's recent biography of Jobs, when the Pixar headquarters was built in 1999, Jobs wanted his staff of artists, writers, computer scientists, etc., to all come in constant contact with one another. So according to Isaacson, Jobs intentionally had the employee mailboxes, the meeting rooms, the cafeteria, coffee bar, gift shop, and even the bathrooms centrally located so that people would have to come into physical contact with one another. And the reason why I pick on these Silicon Valley companies is because in many cases, they make the technology that allows us to collaborate and work remotely. And you would sometimes think that, well, if they can't get it right, what hope is there for the rest of us? But the fact is they suffer from the same challenges that all companies face, and that is how to collaborate and communicate when we're geographically dispersed. So I asked around and I tried to research and say, is there any truth to these perceptions? So if people believe that it's really difficult to collaborate virtually, is there any truth to that? Is there any research? And in fact, there is some research. There have been some studies that have been done in the past, even though some of this stuff is rather dated. I found some of the studies that were over 10 years old, so you have to think of how far the technology has come in the past 10 years where, and Rick will appreciate this, they didn't have some of these collaborative platforms like the one his son is building 10 years ago. But what the research indicates is that virtual teams communicate less effectively than their face-to-face counterparts, even as they communicate more frequently, which basically means that, when people are working remotely and they're in a remote team, they tend to over-communicate via email or instant messaging, and that leads to this sort of vicious cycle because, and many of you may agree, that just because you have more communication, that doesn't necessarily equate to better communication. So as the emails pile up in your inbox, as you get all these messages or voicemails piling up in your phone system, is it really adding more clarity, or is it in the case of most virtual teams where it's actually leading to more confusion because we're over communicating? And they also found, and this second bullet is very interesting because I have found this in my...
Jason, can I interrupt?
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt.
Please. Please.
It seems from this statement that virtual teams compared with face-to-face teams, it seems that the virtual teams did not use video, so they did not have the face-to-face interaction.
And more, don't steal my thunder, please. We're going to talk about video, because you're absolutely right, because some of these studies were done 10 years ago, and you have to think about the video technology and how far that has come in the past 10 years, right? Where we were at, say, late 90s, early part of this decade compared to where we are right now. So you're absolutely right. When teams don't use video, it hinders them. And I'm going to talk specifically about some studies that were done on virtual teams using video versus those not using video. And you can imagine what the results are. But you're absolutely right. But whether we're using video or not, the second bullet is something that I have found in my personal experience that holds very true. And that is the communication in virtual teams is usually more task-focused and less social. And the third bullet ties into that because researchers have found that less social communication is actually associated with less trust and cohesion in teams, which ultimately degrades the collaboration and work that the teams can do. And like I said, I have found that in my personal experiences when we get into virtual teams, there's not a heavy amount of getting to know folks. Maybe people go around the video or the conference call, say who they are, what department they work in, and then it's immediately all right, let's go jump in. What's the goal of this project? And let's go solve the problem. Well, some argue that teams are more effective when they have greater social communication, which is why I asked all of you to introduce yourselves at the beginning of this call and tell me something personal about yourself. You think if we were doing a face-to-face meeting, we might have more interaction, maybe more breaks between the meetings where we can actually get to know one another. And just the way people typically work is if I get to know you a little bit better on a personal scale, we form kind of that bond. I may trust you a little bit more, and that kind of facilitates our working environment. So researchers have found that this social communication lessens over time, the more time as a virtual team has worked together, but it's especially prevalent in the very early stages of team development. So before we can get into designing solutions of how we can get around this and what types of technology we should use or something like that, we have to understand the reasons behind why it's so difficult sometimes to work together virtually. And these, again, this is where the research, though, gets a little bit sketchy because research has identified the problems. They have been less forthcoming about identifying the solution. So I'm going to talk about some of my personal experiences, and hopefully you can share some of yours as well. But if we're talking about engagement and social interaction, what I'm referring to here is about how we come together as a team from our very first meeting and how we continue to build that team over time. As we saw on the slide before, without some type of social interaction, it can lead to problems working together and actually impede collaboration because it degrades the trust and cohesion that we may develop. So that ties in also to how we do the very basics in our meeting logistics. And I'll go into more detail in the next slide of some tactics of what we can do to actually improve that. But there are some very little things that actually impede, if we don't do them correctly, how we come together and how we interact socially within a virtual team. So the second big challenge, or the second root cause of some of the problems that virtual teams have when they collaborate, is around communication. And you have to think that we derive much of our communication through nonverbal cues, such as facial expressions, such as body language, etc. And there's been several studies in the past that have tried to determine how much content we absorb visually versus verbally. And you can basically take the rule of thumb of 4 to 1. So we understand 4 times as much when we combine both visual information with verbal information versus just relying on verbal information alone. And when we say verbal information, I would suspect that could probably apply to just dealing over email or text information as well. And then there's something else that I found interesting through my research, and that was something that psychologists allude to, which I call phone fatigue. And if you've ever been on a conference call for a couple of hours, and let's just assume for a minute you've had no video, it's just been a normal run-of-the-mill conference call, and you've been on a conference call or a series of conference calls for a couple of hours, and when you get done, you feel almost physically exhausted, actually more tired than if you were in a face-to-face meeting. And the answer is, or the question is, why would you feel that way? And psychologists actually have some reasoning behind this, and there was a study that was done years ago, which basically determined that through the phone lines, they can only transmit a certain level or a certain number of audio frequencies versus what the human voice can actually produce. And what that results in is that the human brain actually has to work harder to understand and to pull in all that content than if they also had the visual cues associated with that as well, or at least listening live in person. So dealing just on the phone issue. And then the last issue, which I like to call MTADD, which I refer to as multitasking attention deficit disorder. And I find this prevalent among a lot of virtual teams that I deal with, and that you don't get the full attention of your attendees sometimes when you're working virtually. We all are overloaded right now with information. It's a hyper-connected world. So usually when you get on a virtual team, what do a lot of people do? They put you on mute, they open up another application such as their Microsoft Outlook inbox, and they start sifting through emails or doing something like that. So it's very, very difficult to keep people engaged versus if we were sitting all together in the same room. I could obviously see if you had turned your attention away and you started doing another activity. And all of this ties into the tools and technology that we use. And we'll talk about that over the next couple of slides, about what a difference it can make with the tools that we use versus just relying on traditional tools such as just the audio, the phone line, just relying on email, etc. All right, so let's talk about how we start improving collaboration in our virtual teams. And I start with social identity and group identification. And social identity theory goes something like this. It basically says that we all find ways to identify with the groups that we're in. And the more we can identify with that given group, the more likely we are going to act in a manner in line with group expectations, even put the needs of the group ahead of our own personal needs. So obviously, greater identification with that group then leads to greater trust and cohesion, improved communication, improved cooperation, greater individual contribution to the common good of that group, and an increase in personal productivity. So how do we increase our group identification amongst our team members or give them some sort of identity with that group? And you may be familiar, if you've been around for a while, you've done some reading in the past, around the stages of team or group development. And they follow that simple schematic on the right-hand side of the screen there, where teams typically go through common stages of forming, storming, norming, and performing. And we talk about social identity, it's really that first stage, that forming stage of how we come together. And that stage is really, really important to increase collaboration amongst virtual team members, because if they don't come in, if they don't form correctly, then the rest of the stages tend to take a lot longer. It takes them a lot longer to really provide their full contributions. So one of the first things that can be done is around team selection. When I was doing research for the book Work Shift, I interviewed some executives at a company called Trend Micro. Trend Micro is actually a Tokyo-based company. They produce security software, but the team members are all over the world. I talked to an executive in Salt Lake City who reported to someone over in Germany, and they daily talk to people between Asia-Pac, Europe, and all over North America. And the one thing that they mentioned is that when they brought people into the company, they had a very strict hiring process, and they specifically looked for traits and experience that people had working virtually, because they knew that the majority of the team members that they brought on board, that they brought into the company, were not going to work in a big company location. At best, they might have a local office that they could leverage, but primarily, they knew that many folks were going to work from a home office. And to ensure that those people were set up for success, they looked for specific experiences those people had in the past working virtually. So it can be a challenge. If someone has never worked virtually before, if they never have been remote, and then all of a sudden we put them in that situation and we ask them to contribute 110%, collaborate well, there could be some ramp-up time. There could be some challenges. So if possible, we can look for team members that have already experienced working in that virtual environment. Now, regardless if we find that those types of team members or not, the second bullet applies to any team, and that there actually has been some research done around this as well, and that face-to-face interaction for that very first team meeting, like typically teams have like some sort of kickoff meeting where they just launch a project or they launch a team. If it's feasible, given budgetary constraints or whatever, the recommendation would be if you had one chance to bring that team together in one physical location, that would be it at the very onset of team formation. So you can increase right from the beginning their social interaction, and that would lead hopefully to facilitating greater collaboration down the road. Now, as I said, that's not always feasible. I get into many virtual teams now where we're told we don't have the budget, we have people scattered globally, and it's just not feasible to bring them together. So we have to think of other ways of how we can get around this. And I like to think of the third bullet as breaking the ice or typical icebreakers. And I've seen this just about in every team that I've ever worked with that has been co-located, that has physically been together. from the beginning. They do typically some type of icebreaker type game where they get to know each other, where they start to identify with the group. You learn personal things about people, etc. And that helps increase that social interaction. With virtual teams, I hardly ever see this done. At best, what I see a virtual team do is what we did at the beginning of this call. We just kind of went around the video screen and we just said, please introduce yourself and tell us, what you do. But what I'm suggesting here is to do something a little bit more, which is actually with a little bit of thought, you can do this. You can convert typical icebreaker type games that you would do in a face-to-face setting. You can do those in a virtual environment. It just takes a little bit of thought and creativity, but I would recommend actually doing that. And this goes directly against some of that data that I showed you in the earlier slide about virtual teams being very task-focused, where they just kind of jump right into the issue or the problem that they're trying to solve, and they think they're going to get off and running. And when I've made suggestions to project leaders and to team leaders around, well, the first meeting, forget about getting productive work done. If you only have an hour with your team and it's the first kickoff meeting, besides just establishing the basic things like what the goal of this team is, or maybe some of the expectations, actually spend the time, whether it's 15 minutes, 30 minutes, etc., and do a good icebreaker and actually increase the social interaction between your participants. And a lot of virtual team leaders are very hesitant to do this. It seems to go against their natural inclination just to jump right in and start talking about the problem. But I'm convinced that if you can do this, if you can actually properly introduce folks into the group, increase that social interaction, you'll have a lot better relationships going forward. That trust and cohesion that we talked about earlier, that will be increased right from the beginning and lead to better things. And the fourth bullet under this topic also ties into that, about making time for social communication. Again, the meetings don't always have to be 100% task focused. You can take some time at the very beginning of the meeting or at the very end, or just take some time out to make sure that the people that you're working with have some good social communication. Lynn was talking about how young folks, interact through gaming, through games like World of Warcraft. And there have been some studies in fact, on that specific game itself. And what they found is that the gamers tied into that game were communicating not necessarily about the game itself, so not the task at hand, but a majority of the communication between gamers was more what you consider social communication, about what their hobbies, interests were, how their day was at work, how that went. So researchers believe that type of offline, or I shouldn't call it offline, but non-task related communication actually facilitated their task communication, okay? And then don't forget about the meeting logistics. And these things seem very minute, but they do have a big impact. And the first one is to beware of blended teams. What I mean by that, it becomes very difficult sometimes that if you have a majority of your team members based in one location, and then say you have one or two or a very small minority that are remote. Because typically what happens is what? We use or we try to leverage the folks that we have physically right in front of us, and then maybe we work together for an hour, and then the last 10 minutes we turn to the people that are remote and basically say, do you have anything else to add? And that is not engaging them to the fullest of their capabilities. Probably after the first 10 or 15 minutes, they put you on mute and they turn their attention to something else because you're not engaging them. I used to do a lot.
I totally agree on that. And just on that, I wanted to say that, I worked in a video conferencing company before, and we used to have the capability to take calls from your personal computer, but traditionally we would go into a room and do what you just said. So have the people in the office would meet in a room, and the people that are remote would be on the computer, and that created really this lack of balance, which really go against the people that are remote. So at one point, what we said is, it doesn't matter if you're in the office or remote. When we have a meeting with people remote, we're going to take it from your personal computer. And so everybody's kind of, in the same place, even though we are sitting right next to each other. We are taking it from the computer, and it turned out to work a lot better, much more efficient. Everybody was engaged, and frankly, there's no need to spend the time to go to check the room and make sure it is available and all that stuff.
Yeah, excellent. I call that leveling the playing field, and I use that same tactic as well, just to make sure that everybody's on the same plane. If you have people in the audience, you can kick them out and say, we're going to do this entire meeting virtually, and I find that works well. I've worked for companies where I had to survey folks, and I've surveyed the remote team members, and I find that when we have situations like this, we would get negative feedback from remote workers saying, my feedback is not valued, I'm not a valued team member, etc. And it all has to do with how they're perceiving the group working together. So it can be a challenge. I used to work for, or when I worked for a company, I did a lot of online training for that company. And I was used to doing training in a classroom where I was face-to-face with all my participants. And when I moved that to online, I had to change everything of how I did things. And I got some sage advice from an experienced online trainer who said, Jay, just remember, you got 7 minutes. I said, okay, 7 minutes, what? He goes, you got 7 minutes until everybody's completely asleep on you. And, so you can't lecture folks. They will be asleep. They'll be in their inbox. They'll be doing something else, everything but paying attention to you. And that's a rule of thumb that you can also use in your team meetings as well. If you're going to work virtually, you can't just dispense information. You can look for other means. If you just need to give out information, you can use, maybe your team has an intranet site or a wiki site or some sort of other repository that you can just blast information out there, versus the time that you're actually spending together has to be interactive. So if you find yourself, lecturing or talking for more than a few minutes, you're going to have to find a way to pull people back in, ask them questions perhaps, have other people share their point of view, even if you have to put them on the spot or, just keep them constantly engaged. And the second bullet also kind of ties into that as well, and it's about if you're working with global teams, especially about balancing the time zones. I've worked in companies before where it was very centric to wherever the company headquarters were, and everybody else was kind of expected to call in or have meetings around those hours. But again, you get the same results that I just talked about, where team members that are remote may feel kind of disenfranchised because, they can't do a meeting at 1 a.m. I mean, I know when I've worked with global teams, I've always rotated the times, even if it would put me at an inconvenience where I had to get up at 2 or 3 a.m. Well, occasionally you have to do that. And that shows the other team members that you're committed to the team and that everything's fair and balanced. And lastly, just kind of as a good logistics for your teams, ensure that at the very, start of your teams in the forming or storming stages, that you're establishing some ground rules, some guiding principles, maybe expectations, what the goals are. And when I say goals, not necessarily the goals of what the project team may be working towards, but goals on how you're going to work together as a team. So once you have that ground rules set, that series of ground rules set up, the expectations are set and people can conform more easily to those terms. All right. So now I'm going to talk about technology, because technology plays a huge piece in this. And more, you were stealing my thunder earlier, I believe, when you were talking about video. And video is so prevalent now, and it's such a great thing. We have a lot of different video options, from our handheld devices to web cameras to the collaborative software that we're using today, or even the very, very high-end systems like telepresence that are in some large companies. And there was a study done some time ago, and it's a little bit dated. It was done a few years back, but they tested how users collaborated with or without video. And unsurprisingly, users wanted video. Users believed that video added value to their interactions and made their interactions more satisfying. And in this regard, the quality of the video comes into play here. In that same study, users working with video, some used desktop video, while others were using systems with much better quality. and the perception of the value of their interactions increase with the quality of the video system. So intuitively, this makes sense that, with better resolution, less latency in the video, it feels like a more improved or enhanced experience, or a richer experience, I should say, and it'll give us a better or more satisfying experience. So video, ironically, when I work with some virtual teams, they have the capability to do video, just like we're doing today. I mean, video, you could use Google Hangout, you could use a number of different free online tools to do a video chat, but I still find that a lot of teams don't use video. And I get those excuses of, well, working in my home office, that means I actually have to, get out of my pajamas and actually put some clothes on or whatever. But again, going back to those guiding principles, I've worked in virtual teams where they set right up in the beginning, I expect you to be on video for every team meeting. We are going to use video in this team 100% of the time. Assuming that you're part of this team, you're going to use video. And people sometimes reluctantly do that, but once they do that, they do find that they have a better experience and they get more out of it, because now we can see each other, we can read the body language, we can take the visual cues, and we feel more a greater bond between the folks that we work with. And also, there's a lot of technology out there around desktop sharing applications, collaborative technologies. A couple that I'm most familiar with are probably Cisco's WebEx, there's Citrix GoToMeeting, and then there's Adobe Connect, and they're all virtually the same thing. They allow us, just like we're doing today through Zoom, to share information, to share our desktop so we can see what each other is working on. These applications also have virtual whiteboards, because I've often heard from virtual teams, or I've heard from people that are used to working in traditional office environments, well, it's much harder to work in a virtual team because, you can't get into a conference room and get on the whiteboard. Well, actually you can. You can do that with today's technology. We have finally come a long way. All that technology is out there, and those tools can help enrich the experience. So if we start using those, you'll find that the quality and quantity of your collaboration within your virtual teams will actually increase as well. All right, so let me pause there. I see that we got about 10 minutes to the end of the hour, and I want to be respectful of everybody's time, but I violated one of my earlier rules, which was 7 minutes until they're asleep. I've spoken for a lot longer than 7 minutes, so let me open it up to any questions or experiences that you guys want to share. I mean, what are your thoughts?
And Jason, while we do that, I suggested to stop sharing, and then we'll see the video in a larger display.
Okay. So I just stop sharing. All right.
Okay.
Now I can see just about everybody here. If you go to the top right, there's a little icon where you can add more of the screens. It looks like you get about 9 on the screen at one time.
Right.
So very nice. So the brilliance of using video. So this is great. So what are your thoughts? I mean, all of you, it seems like all of you are working from home or a home office. I mean, what are your experiences? And don't all share at once.
Well, this is Paul. I know Lynn and I talked about this quite a bit, and Lynn, you know where I'm going to be going on this. And this has to do with the importance of culture in a social collaborative environment. And I'm not too sure if there's a real answer to this, but there are some cultures where collaboration, free communication is not necessarily as honed or as permitted as maybe the societies that we're in. A good example would be in terms of China. They don't necessarily on an individual basis feel free to communicate without going through some kind of vetting process with the leader of a team or whatever. I know that organizations are really concerned about this if we're really going to be engaging employees and taking advantage of the individual knowledges when we need them. Lynn, do you want to kind of add to that? I think you have some great thoughts on this too.
Well, like I said, I think that, in any culture, it might be a broad problem, say, in China, but there are always, you have to find the individuals who are willing to speak out, there are always exceptions to the rule. Mm-hmm. And it's a hard place to go because you don't also want to violate other people's values. Because I know that, I know people who like you speak of, where there's a sense of safety in, vetting everything through the authority at the top before you speak out and say anything. So, yeah, that's a hard road to cross. That's really, all I can say about it.
Mm-hmm. So I'll be very curious to find out anybody else in an environment, organizational environment where you're trying to strive for free flow of communication. What are some of the techniques that were used that were successful in achieving some of that stuff?
Well, if I could just go back a little bit, I think the environment's changing very, very rapidly, especially between Gen X and Gen Y. Mm-hmm. So, over the next couple of years, as these types of interfaces get more sophisticated, the quality of the video gets better, people sort of adapt the interfaces to actually people working remotely like this. I think most of the conventional wisdom from studies in the past is just going to fly out the window. So, for example, a year ago I was on board of a high-tech company. I was the only person out here in California. So when we had board meetings, and it was about 8 people, they took a laptop and they put it at the head of the table, and that was virtual me, and we did it with video, and it worked very, very well. And so that was a blended group, but because we had got to know each other over a period of time, because we had monthly board meetings, it really worked very, very well. To pick up on, and I'm sorry, Mouse Paul's comment, we use developers overseas quite heavily, and the way we keep in touch is via video conferencing. And I'm finding the Gen Yers are much more open and much more able to have free communications in this type of setting than some of the older folks like myself. So I think things are changing rapidly.
Great point.
Anyone else?
I had a quick question with regards to the tools and technology that, Jason, that you were mentioning. Maybe if anyone else has any suggestions or recommendations, particularly like with, you mentioned like a virtual whiteboard, and my audio was a bit patchy, so I'm not sure if I caught everything you were saying, but if you could maybe elaborate and recommend anything.
Full disclosure, I do work for Cisco Systems, which owns WebEx. So obviously I'm familiar with Cisco's product more than I am other products. So the information I'm about to say is going to be very biased. So let me just say that. WebEx, in the actual application itself, has a whiteboard functionality. So it brings up a blank screen. You can draw on it with your mouse and use some of the tools, so you can try to replicate what you would be doing in a face-to-face environment. I am less familiar with Citrix's GoToMeeting and Adobe Connect, but my guess is they probably all have the same functionality where you can actually bring that up. There's some other neat tools out there, and I was looking for them earlier this week, because I've seen it before, and I just couldn't find a link. They have interactive whiteboards right now that it's actually a physical whiteboard that you can write on, and it will translate that onto your screen itself so your other participants can see it, and they can also alter the image on their end. If I can find a link for where I saw that, I will send that to Moore that he can send out to the group. But, I've used, oh, go ahead, Moore.
Yeah, the one that is very, popular is the Smart company. They have this, obviously, and now they are actually fully integrated with the Microsoft Link. in a way that you can have a smart board with, basically it's a smart room system, and people can, share in that meeting, and everybody can see what they share on the whiteboard.
Yeah.
So the question that I was...
I'm sorry. I am also a little biased in that we do offer a video collaboration service that has a whiteboard that's geared for these things. So if you want to take a look at gelvideo.com, it might be a reasonable alternative for you.
So a question that I would have...
Was it joevideo.com?
JELL video.com.
All right. Thank you. I'll check it out.
Yeah.
So a question that I have is, I know that sometimes when you're whiteboarding, you need to kind of toss the baton over to the person who wants to put something on the whiteboard. Many times when we work in teams, especially if we're brainstorming, it's basically everybody has a chalk, everybody goes to the chalkboard, and collaboratively, all at the same time, be able to diagram whatever it is they're working on. Have we gotten that sophisticated where we can have multi-users at the same time collaborating in the same way on a whiteboard?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. So I'm still old school. I know it has been in the past where one person can only write at one time and not everybody.
Yeah. Again, keep in mind my feedback is biased, but in those applications that I mentioned, WebEx or GoToMeeting, Adobe Connect, you can do that. You can interact at the same time, and it'll create it right there.
Yep. Just in terms of time management, we are at the top of the hour, but from my perspective, we can continue if anybody is interested. I'm interested. So just to let you know, we can continue as much as we can.
How about social collaborative environments itself? I'm talking about exclusive of perhaps some of the technologies, but maybe physical placement, things that you would most likely want to have to encourage or facilitate communication in terms of the environment, whether it be location of rooms, what's in the rooms, proximity to one another, those sort of things. Have you done any research or gotten any information about, the social setting, if you will?
Yeah, I personally have not done a lot of research in this area, but I did work with some of that on workshop that is an actual architect, because a lot of the work environments are moving to more hot desking or hoteling type environments. So what we've been used to for decades in these kind of cubicle farms that the typical office building is set up like, they're all going away. And they're mainly going away because businesses and even government agencies realize that it costs a lot of money to maintain. So if I introduce some flexible work policies that allow people to work from home, people will take advantage of that. Some people will still want to work in a specific location or will still need to work in a location from at least time to time, but I could probably reduce my actual footprint, my real estate footprint in a given area. So what a lot of organizations are doing is they are taking the building, getting rid of the standard traditional cubicle farm environment, setting up more open collaborative spaces where you can just come in with whoever you're working with that day, choose the space that you're going to work with. Cisco has several buildings that are set up in this way, and it's actually quite interesting. When they made the transition to go from a traditional environment, people pushed back. People became very attached to their cubicle and their personal shrine or whatever that they created in that. And now they're being told, hey, look, your workstation could change every single day. So you come into an office, you don't have an assigned seating arrangement. You plunk down, plug your laptop in, press a few buttons on the phone in front of you, and your phone number pops up. And now you're ready to work with whoever you need to work with that day. And then, of course, you do need some privacy areas. So say a team is going to have a confidential conversation, you do need those traditional meeting rooms. But Paul, if you're asking, how do you do that? How do you determine the resource allocation for that? I personally have not done enough studying in that area. I just know that a lot of organizations are moving in that direction. I don't know, does anybody else actually work in a location that's like that?
I think one of the
Everybody
things
works from
that
home. Everybody on the phone works from home. They're like, going to an office, forget that.
well, I think one of the things that I've noticed, and I'm kind of interested in, is in those environments where, yeah, the insistence is to be there as a physical grouping, if you will, inside maybe one room, whether it be a conference room or whether it be actually on the floor, let's say in a manufacturing facility, or in like a shared space where you want to capture the essence of that particular room. One of the things that I think we've seen more is 360-degree cameras where we can actually have the look and the feel of that particular environment and be able to, by noticing who's in that room, be able to reach out and touch someone when you need them to collaborate at the time you're working on the particular issue. You know, that would be one example of a collaborative environment in a group setting. However, you have to make sure that the physical environment will be allowing for that. You know, there won't be all of a sudden barriers so you are not able to see who all is in that particular space.
Gotcha.
Well, one thing that, Jason, I want to kind of focus on, if you don't mind, is, you know, the fact that, you know, you mentioned Yahoo and Steve Jobs, and I know Google is also around it. They really emphasize the importance of, you know, impromptu communications, and the question I have is really if that is something that is kind of covered by research. I wonder if indeed a lot of good innovation has resulted from people meeting in the bathroom or in the line to the cafeteria or in the, you know, that there is a theory that they create a 3 to 4 minutes line in the cafeteria for people to get interaction instead of just being, you know, no lines there. And also in some companies, they tunnel everybody to go through the same hallway so that they will meet. So I wonder if there are examples of real innovation derived from those people meeting in the bathroom or in the line in the cafeteria.
More my personal opinion, and I hear this all the time about, yeah, what about the water cooler conversations and all that sort of stuff? I personally think that's all overrated. I think that me personally, from my personal experience, I've never had a great, brilliant idea with another coworker come while we were waiting in line in the break room for my lean cuisine to pop in the microwave. I mean, I've never personally had that experience. Maybe somebody else has, but I personally think it's overrated. I think the benefit of having people together like that is because the social interaction is increased. We know each other a lot more because I'm used to seeing you. You know, we have some sort of personal interaction, not just work interaction. Now I feel more comfortable working and sharing ideas with you. And that's why I say, you know, in a virtual environment, we need to try to replicate that same social interaction, or at least we need to take the effort to increase the social communication and not just the task communication. And Joe brought out a great point about the generational differences, because Gen Y and whatever comes behind them, Gen Z or whatever we're going to call them, my kids who are in elementary school, when they grow up, I mean, they're going to be so used to forming relationships online via social media or whatever else is out there that they'll have no issues, no trouble like we have today when we're, you know, people like us may be used to working in traditional office environments, and then we go to a virtual office environment. So I think that will change over time. I think that perception more is going to change over time. It's probably going to take a generation to get through the workforce before we're completely just dismiss that whole idea that, oh, we have to be physically together in order to have those impromptu meetings where these genius ideas are going to pop out.
Yeah.
I don't know. Anybody else agree, disagree?
Yeah, I must say that I totally agree that we need the social interaction. I think that, you know, it should be more structured, actually, meaning what I'm recommending to customers is when they go to virtual and when they work with virtual teams, to have physical meetings once in a month or once in a quarter, whatever works for that company, and then focus on those events, focus on really bonding people, right? So then when they go outside to their home and to their remote office, and when they do have a virtual meeting, then it's complementary to the background that they gain when they met physically. So I think the mixture is very important, but you don't need that every time, right? You don't need that all the time. Once you do that once in a while, that's good enough, and set up the framework for really effective virtual teamwork.
Right. Agreed.
And also, some people say, I must go to see my customers. Same thing. Yeah, you would want to go see the customer, maybe first meeting, maybe the second meeting after you qualified virtually the customer. But then going forward, if you have multiple meetings with the same customer, after you met the person, you can do it remotely just as effectively.
I just have a quick question. I'm gonna have to leave, but I'm new to this meetup, and I find this discussion and presentation quite interesting. I'm curious, and I've also noticed that it's being recorded. Is this video and past videos being posted somewhere?
No, we don't post them. I just take snapshots from the videos and put them as pictures, as photos on the Meetup group.
What about the presentation itself? Can I send that to you so you can send out to the group?
Yes, absolutely. We also have previous presentations up on the Meetup group. I just want to encourage people to actually participate live in those events and not wait for the recording to come later.
Mm-hmm. So, and just to let everybody know, I mentioned a lot of different research and studies that were used or that were referenced. I do have a couple of slides in the backup with all of those listed out. So, David, I know they may be of interest to you as you continue on with your studies, or whoever else, if you just want to, if you suffer from insomnia and you want to read some white papers or whatever. I've listed all those out for you. So when you get the presentation, you'll be able to check it out.
Thank you.
Great. So, unless anybody wants to add some final comments, I want to thank Jason for a really great presentation and great talk. And I look forward to seeing everybody here next month. We will set up a time and a presenter in the next week or so.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you, Jason.
Thanks, folks.
Thank you. Thanks.